Lena Ashwood learned how to disappear without anyone noticing she was gone. She did not make a scene. She did not slam doors. She did not leave a letter. She simply walked, steady feet, straight back, chin level, through the side door of the great ceremony hall and out into the cold night air, and by the time anyone thought to look for her, there was nothing to find but the faint smell of pine and the empty space where she had been standing. The ceremony had been a formal thing. 5 packs gathered under one stone roof, torchlight on every face, the Alpha King moving down the line of unmated Omegas in the old tradition. It was supposed to be an honor to be chosen. Lena had told herself that 3 times on the walk over, and she had not believed herself any of the 3 times. She had stood in the line with her shoulders even and her eyes on the far wall. When Calum Voss passed her, tall, dark-coated, utterly still, in the way that very powerful people learn to be, the bond snapped into place between them, like a branch breaking under ice, a sound, a feeling, something that arrived without asking permission. He stopped walking. He looked at her. She looked back at him. For 1 second, she saw something move behind his eyes, something she had no name for. Then he looked past her and said 2 words in a voice the whole hall could hear. I reject. The hall did not breathe. Lena did not breathe. She stood there for exactly 3 more seconds, feeling the words settle over her, the way cold water settles, all at once, from the top down, and then she walked out of the line, through the side door, and into the dark. She did not run. That was the part she was most proud of, later. She ran later, when no one was watching. The borderlands were 3 days east of the ceremony city, past 2 river crossings and a range of low hills that nobody particularly wanted. That was why Lena chose them. Places nobody particularly wanted had a certain practical freedom. No one was watching, no one was counting, and no one came looking for people who had no reason to be found. She took work as a courier. It suited her perfectly. You belonged to the road between 2 places, which meant you belonged nowhere, which meant no one asked questions about where you had come from, or who had decided your worth in a stone hall in front of 200 witnesses. She learned the borderland routes, the way she had learned everything useful in her life, quietly, thoroughly, and at night. The night crossings were the tricky ones, the ones with the timing-sensitive border patrols and the narrow windows of safe passage, and she became very good at them. She became, in fact, the best. Packs on both sides of the border sent for her specifically when something needed to move without being seen. She was good at things that moved without being seen. Every new moon, she felt the bond. It was directional, a pull, like a compass needle, pointing roughly northwest toward a place she refused to think about. She had developed a technique for dealing with it. She pressed 2 fingers against the inside of her wrist and held them there until the feeling passed, the way you press a bruise to remind yourself it has stopped bleeding. It had not stopped bleeding, but she had become very good at pressing. She had also become very good at drawing maps. Her walls were covered in them, routes annotated with water sources, way station distances, the exact timing of every patrol change on the eastern border. She redrew them when conditions changed. She redrew them when they were already accurate. She had drawn the western crossing route 14 times. It was perfect. She did not think about why she kept drawing it. She just kept drawing. On the night everything changed, she was at a way station halfway up the old logging road, resupplying her pack by lamplight. Vials of medicine, dried food, extra cord. She counted everything twice. Counting things twice was a habit she had built deliberately. It kept the mind occupied, and an occupied mind did not drift northwest. She was counting her medicine vials for the 2nd time when she heard a sound outside. Not the usual sounds, not the ordinary sounds of small animals and wind and the creaking of old wood settling. This was different. This was the sound of something very large and very controlled standing very still, just beyond the edge of her lamplight. She did not stop counting. 15 vials. 16. You can come in, she said, keeping her voice flat and even. Or you can stand out there. Either way, I know you're there. There was a pause. Then the door opened, and Calum Voss stepped into her lamplight. He was without his crown insignia. Without his formal coat, he wore the kind of plain dark clothing that a man wears when he does not want to be recognized as what he is, and it did not work at all, Because he carried his authority the way very certain people carry it. In the bones, in the exact angle of the shoulders, and there was no clothing that would cover that. He looked at her, she looked at him. Then she went back to counting. 16 vials. She had 16. She arranged them in a line. Lena, he said. It was the first time he had said her name since the ceremony. She felt it move through her, the way a sound moves through water, reaching every part of her before she could stop it. She picked up the vials and put them back in the pack, one at a time, very carefully. There is water in the jug on the left, she said. Borderlands custom. You drink before I ask you to leave. He crossed the room. He poured a cup of water. He drank it standing up, the way a man drinks water when he is using the action to buy himself a moment, and she watched him out of the corner of her eye and said nothing. I have been looking for you, he said. I know. She had felt him getting closer over the past 3 days. The bond compass, pointing northwest, had gradually shifted and reshifted, moving in a wide, slow arc, until last night it had pointed almost due south. She had counted her vials 11 times that night. The plaster on the eastern wall had a new crack in it. I need to explain, he said. You are allowed to explain, she said. She tied the pack closed. I am not required to find it satisfying. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without being invited, which was either arrogance or desperation, and she had not decided which. He set his hands flat on the table. She noticed that his hands were not entirely steady. 3 years before the ceremony, he said, I made a political agreement with the Voss Council. It was required for peace between the Northern Territories. The agreement contained a clause. He stopped. He started again. The clause stated that the Alpha King would take no fated mate. If a mate bond presented itself at the ceremony, and they knew it was a possibility, they had arranged the ceremony specifically to surface one. The bond was to be rejected publicly, to prove I was not above the agreement. Lena was very still. If I had accepted you, he said, there were 3 senior council members who had already arranged to have you removed, not sent away, removed. He said the word precisely, without any covering around it. Within the year, they would have made it look like a border incident, the kind that happens to couriers. She looked at him for a long time. He held her gaze the way a person holds something that is very heavy and has been very heavy for a long time. I know how to disappear, she said. Her voice was very quiet. I have been doing it successfully for 3 years. You could have told me. He closed his eyes, just for a second. Then he opened them again. You are right, he said. I decided for you. I decided what risk you could or could not carry. That was wrong. I have known it was wrong since the night of the ceremony. Since the night, she said. Since approximately 30 seconds after you walked out the door. She stood up. She moved to the window and looked out at the dark hills, and she pressed 2 fingers against her wrist, and she stood there for a while. The bond was very loud right now. Not the directional pull she had been managing for 3 years. Something else, something that knew he was 12 feet behind her, and was entirely uninterested in her management techniques. The council members, she said. Are they still? No, he said. Not since 8 months ago. The political agreement was dissolved. I dissolved it. A pause. It cost me the Northern Alliance. She turned around. You dissolved a political alliance. Yes. A 3-year alliance with the Northern Territories. Yes. For someone who had already left. He looked at her evenly. For someone I had already wronged. It was not about what I needed back. It was about making it right. She looked at him for a long time. This was the part she had not prepared for. She had prepared, in the years of practice and occupation and deliberate map drawing, for his absence. She had prepared, somewhat, for the possibility of his appearance. She had prepared for anger, which was familiar and reliable, and felt like solid ground under her feet. She had prepared for cold, for careful, for controlled. She had not prepared for the possibility that he was someone who dissolved alliances for people who were already gone. She went back to the table and sat down. Outside, somewhere in the dark hills, she heard a sound she recognized without identifying. A low, quiet sound. The sound of a large animal settling into stillness. Not leaving, not approaching, simply settling, with enormous patience, to wait. His wolf. It had stopped searching. She found, to her complete surprise, that there was something in her chest that responded to that. Not warmly, not easily, not without a 3-year argument on the other side of it, but something. A small, careful something, like a lamp, turned very low. "You should stay tonight," she said. "The northern road is dangerous after midnight." He said nothing for a moment. "I know the road," he said. "I know you know the road. I am telling you to stay." She stood up, crossed to the corner, and made up the cot in precise, efficient movements. Blankets squared at the corners, pillow set at the correct angle. She did not offer it to him formally. She did not explain herself. She simply made it up and left it made, and then she went to her own bunk and lay down and looked at the ceiling. She blew out the lamp. The room went dark. She heard him sit in the chair for a while, and then she heard the quiet sound of him moving to the cot. In the dark, the Bond was completely, thoroughly awake. Not pulling, not pointing, simply present, steady and close and warm, in the way that a fire is warm through a wall. She could feel it the way she could feel her own heartbeat, and for the first time in 3 years, she did not press it flat. She lay there, and she let herself feel it. It was quite large. It was quite old. It had been there the whole time, through the border crossings and the night roads and the 14 redrawn maps and the 11 vial counts, patient and unmanageable, and entirely unbothered by her techniques. She pressed her fingers against her wrist. It pressed back. She was not ready to forgive him. She knew that clearly, and without drama. She was not ready, and she would not pretend to be. And she suspected he knew that too, because he was lying on the cot in the dark, and he was not asking her for anything. He was simply there, the way his wolf was simply there, outside in the dark hills, with no argument, and no deadline, and no decision being demanded tonight. Tomorrow, she would have to decide something. Tonight, she did not have to decide anything. She stared at the ceiling, and let the Bond be warm, and said nothing, and did not sleep for a long time, and in that long quiet she felt, for the first time in 3 years, something that was not grief, and not anger, and not the specific exhaustion of pressing something flat that refused to stay flat. She felt the shape of a question she had not been ready to ask before. It had no answer yet, but it was honest, and new, and entirely hers. Outside, the wolf settled deeper into the dark. And the night stayed quiet, and the road stayed dark, and the lamp on the table had gone cold, and Lena Ashwood lay still in her bunk in the borderlands, and felt the first careful edges of a future that had not existed this morning. She did not know what she would do with it. That, she decided, was the most honest thing she had felt in 3 years.